Look, I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm making it up, or that I've lost my mind from too many double shifts. But I need to say this out loud to someone who isn't stuck in that building with me every night. Maybe you'll listen. Maybe you won't. Either way, I'm saying it. I work night shift at Riverside Children's Hospital. 11 years now. Pediatric care, mostly ages 5 to 12, though we get teenagers sometimes when the adolescent wing is full. It's hard work. Kids are scared. Parents are exhausted. And you're dealing with illness and pain and all the things that keep people up at night even. And they're not the ones wearing the scrubs. But the work isn't what's hard. Not really. It's everything else. The things they don't put in the employee handbook. The things the day shift doesn't see because they clock out before sunset and arrive after dawn. The things that only exist in those hours between midnight and 5 a.m., when the hospital feels less like a building and more like something alive. That's learned to hold its breath. They gave me a list on my first night. Not the usual orientation stuff about HIPAA compliance and emergency protocols. This was different. Handwritten on hospital stationery, folded twice, handed to me by the outgoing night supervisor who looked like she hadn't slept in a month. Follow these exactly, she said. Don't ask why. Don't try to be clever about it. Just follow them. Then she left, and I was alone with 4 pediatric patients. 2 medical residents who looked barely older than the kids they were treating, and a list of rules that made absolutely no sense. 11 years later, they make perfect sense. And I wish they didn't. Rule 1. Never enter a patient's room after they've fallen asleep. This seemed counterintuitive at first. We're nurses. We have to check on patients throughout the night vitals, medications, making sure their IVs haven't slipped or their breathing hasn't changed. Pediatric patients especially need frequent monitoring. They crash faster than adults. You can't just let them sleep through the night unobserved. But the rule didn't say don't observe them. It said don't enter their rooms. The hospital has cameras in every patient room, mounted in the corners, recording constantly. During night shift, we're supposed to monitor them from the nurse's station instead of doing physical room checks. Every 30 minutes, you pull up the feed and watch. You can see their breathing patterns, check if they're in distress, make sure their monitors are functioning. If something looks wrong on camera, you're supposed to call a code and wait for the rapid response team. You don't go in yourself, not while they're asleep. I didn't understand why until my 3rd night. A 6-year-old in room 407 had been admitted for pneumonia. She'd been doing well-stable vitals, good oxygen saturation, no fever. At 1:30 a.m., I checked the camera feed and saw her sleeping peacefully, curled on her side, stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. At 2 a.m., I checked again. She was still asleep, but something was different. There was someone else in the room. This figure standing beside her bed. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like a hospital gown. But wrong somehow. Too long, too loose. Like it was draped over something that wasn't quite human-shaped. I grabbed the phone to call security. But before I could dial, the figure turned its head toward the camera, slowly, deliberately, like it knew exactly. Where I was and what I was doing, it had no face. Just smooth, blank skin where features should have been. I dropped the phone. When I looked back at the monitor, the figure was gone. The girl was still sleeping. Her monitors showed normal readings. Everything looked fine. But when I pulled up the recorded footage from the last 30 minutes, there was a gap. Exactly 4 minutes missing. From 1:58 a.m. to 2:02 a.m., the timestamp jumped from one to the other with no transition. Like those 4 minutes had been cut out of reality. The next morning, girl complained that her stuffed rabbit felt different. Said it smelled wrong. When her mother asked her to explain, she said it smelled like the person who'd been standing by her bed during the night. What person? Her mother asked. The tall one with no face. The one who touched my hair. Her mother laughed it off as a dream. The girl didn't laugh. She stared at me while her mother was distracted, and her eyes were too old for a 6-year-old. To knowing. You saw it too, she whispered when her mother left the room. You were watching. I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night I followed the rule. I watched the cameras. And when I saw something that didn't belong standing beside a sleeping child, I didn't go into the room. I just watched until it left on its own. Because here's what I've learned. Those things only interact with sleeping children. If you enter the room while both the child and the thing are present, you become part of whatever transaction is happening. You're no longer an observer. You're a participant. And the nurses who became participants don't work here anymore. Most of them don't work anywhere anymore. Rule 2. If a child draws a picture of you, burn it before morning. Children draw constantly in the hospital. It's part of their coping mechanism, art therapy, the child life specialists call it. They draw pictures of their families, their pets, their favorite cartoons. Sometimes they draw the hospital itself, their rooms, the nurses who care for them. Usually these drawings are sweet. Stick figures with big smiles. Hearts and rainbows. Thank you messages in crayon. We put them on the break room fridge or send them home with the parents. But sometimes, maybe once every few months, a child will draw something different. I'm in dozens of these drawings. Most of them are normal. A stick figure in scrubs, with best nurse written in shaky letters. I've kept a few of them over the years. It's tucked into my locker or taped to my bathroom mirror at home, but 3 times in 11 years. A child has drawn me, and I've had to burn the picture before sunrise. The first time was 8 years ago. A 9-year-old post-surgical patient, recovering from an appendectomy, quiet kid. Didn't talk much. Spent most of his time drawing while his parents slept in the chair beside his bed. Around 3 a.m., he pressed the call button. When I came to the door, I didn't go in, just stood in the doorway. He held up a piece of paper. "I made this for you," he said. The drawing showed a nurse. She had my hair, my build, my scrubs, but her face was wrong. Her mouth was open too wide, stretched into a smile that wrapped around the sides of her head. Her eyes were black circles with nothing inside them. Behind her in the drawing were dozens of small figures, children, and they were all lying down. "That's you," he said, pointing at the nurse. "In 3 days?" "That's very creative," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why don't you save it for your mom to see in the morning?" "No," he shook his head seriously. "You have to take it now, and you have to burn it before the sun comes up. If you don't, it becomes real." "Who told you that?" "The lady with no face. She comes at night. She told me lots of things." He held out the drawing. "Please, I don't want you to look like this." I took the picture. I don't know why. Maybe because he seemed so genuinely frightened. Maybe because some part of me already believed him. I burned it in the parking lot at 5:47 a.m. Using a lighter I borrowed from one of the ER nurses. The paper burned wrong too fast, with greenish smoke, and a smell like chemicals and something organic decomposing. 3 days later, I was fine. But the day shift nurse who'd replaced me that morning called in sick. When she finally came back a week later, she'd changed. Something about her face was different. Her smile too wide. Her eyes too empty. She quit 2 months later. I heard she moved across the country. I hope she's okay. I hope distance matters. The second drawing came 5 years ago. A 7-year-old cancer patient, in stage, lucid only in brief windows between pain medication. She drew me standing in an empty hallway. Just me, no other details. But in the drawing, I was facing away from the viewer, looking at something around a corner. And there were footprints behind Misa Mall's child, footprints leading away down the hall. Getting fainter with each step at the bottom of the page, she'd written, "Don't follow them." I burned that one too. At 5:23 a.m., in the same parking lot, this time I understood what the drawing meant. Because that same night around 4 a.m., I'd heard a child crying. The sound came from the long corridor that connects the pediatric wing to radiology. I'd followed it, turning corner after corner, the crying always just ahead. After 5 minutes, I realized I was lost. The hallway looked the same in every direction, and I couldn't remember which turns I'd taken. Then, I looked down and saw wet footprints on the floor, small, barefoot, leading away from where I stood. I hadn't been following crying. I'd been following footprints. and they'd led me somewhere the hospital corridors didn't go, I turned around and ran. Eventually, I found a door marked exit, pushed through, and ended up in a stairwell I didn't recognize. But it led up, and up felt safer than deeper in. So I climbed until I reached a door that opened into the main pediatric wing. Right where I'd started, the girl who drew the picture died 2 days later. Before she passed, while I was adjusting her morphine drip, she grabbed my hand. "You didn't follow them," she whispered. "Good, how did you know?" I asked because I followed them once. Before I got sick. That's why I'm here. She closed her eyes. They don't let you come all the way back. The third drawing came last year. I burned it like the others. I won't describe what it showed. Some things don't need to be said out loud. But I'll tell you this. Whatever was going to happen in that picture, I'm glad it didn't. The rule is absolute. If a child draws you, and the drawing is wrong, if something about it feels off in a way you can't quite articulate, burn it before morning. Don't show it to anyone. Don't try to interpret it. Don't keep it as evidence. Just burn it and pray that's enough to break whatever connection was being formed between the image and reality. Rule 3. The playroom closes at 10 p.m. Do not unlock it for any reason. The hospital has a playroom at the end of the pediatric wing. During the day, it's full of toys, books, video games, craft supplies. It's brightly lit and cheerful, decorated with murals of cartoon animals and superheroes. Mobile patients are encouraged to spend time there when they're feeling up to it. It's meant to feel less clinical, less like a hospital, and more like a safe place. At 10 p.m. every night, the playroom is locked. The lights are turned off. The toys are put away. A sign is placed on the door. Playroom closed opens at 8 a.m. This seems like a reasonable policy. Kids need sleep. Staff needs to focus on medical care. It makes sense, but the rule isn't about logistics. The rule is about keeping something contained. I've stood outside that door at 2 a.m. and heard children laughing inside. Multiple children, playing, running, talking. But when I check the patient roster, every child on the floor is accounted for. In their rooms, asleep or awake, but accounted for. Once, about 6 years ago, I pressed my ear against the playroom door. I could hear them clearly. At least a dozen different voices, maybe more. They were playing a game. Tag, it sounded like. Running in circles, giggling. Then one of them said something that made my blood freeze. "Let's play hospital. I'll be the nurse. You can be the sick one who doesn't wake up." The others laughed. Not child laughter. Something mimicking it. Close, but wrong. Like someone had listened to children laugh and tried to recreate the sound without understanding what made it genuine. I stepped back from the door. The laughing stopped immediately. Total silence. Then, quietly, from directly on the other side of the door, "We know you're out there. We can smell you." A child's voice, but flat, emotionless. "Open the door," it said. "We want to play with you." I walked away. I didn't run. Running would have acknowledged that I was afraid. I just walked calmly back to the nurse's station and stayed there till sunrise. When day shift arrived and unlocked the playroom at 8 a.m., everything was normal. Toys arranged neatly, books on shelves. No sign that anything had been disturbed, but one of the day nurses commented that it smelled strange in there, like dozens of children had been playing all night. Sweat and candy, and something underneath that was harder to identify. Something stale. They opened the windows to air it out. By noon, the smell was gone. I've heard other nurses talk about the playroom. Late-night conversations in the break room, voices kept low. One nurse said she unlocked it once around midnight because a patient insisted her favorite stuffed animal was inside and she couldn't sleep without it. The nurse went in, found the stuffed animal on the shelf where it had been left, but when she turned to leave, all the toys were facing her. The dolls, the action figures, even the stuffed animals, all turned toward the door. Watching, she grabbed the stuffed animal and left. Locked the door behind her, but for weeks afterward, she said she felt like she was being watched during her shifts, not by people, by something smaller. Something that could fit in spaces adults couldn't. She quit eventually. Transferred to an adult oncology ward across town, another nurse told me. She'd seen handprints on the inside of the playroom window. Small handprints. Dozens of them, overlapping. Like many children had pressed their hands against the glass all at once, trying to get out, or trying to get someone's attention. Trying to make them open the door, the handprints were gone by morning. But she swears she saw them, and I believe her, because I've seen them too. At 3:47 a.m. last Tuesday, so many handprints the glass was almost completely covered. And in the center, written in what looked like condensation, but couldn't have been because the AC had been running all night. Please. I didn't open the door. I closed the blinds instead and filed a maintenance request to have the window cleaned. By morning, there was nothing to clean. The playroom has been locked at 10 p.m. for as long as this hospital has existed, 53 years. And in 53 years, no one has ever entered that room between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. and come out the same person. They were when they went in. I don't know what's in there when the lights go out, but I know it's not just toys and empty space. I know it's something that wants out. Something that mimics children because children are what belongs in a playroom. Something that's learning to be more convincing every year. And I know that the day someone ignores the rule and opens that door in the middle of the night, whatever comes out isn't going to go back in. Rule 4. If you see yourself walking the halls, do not make eye contact. This is the rule I understand least. It's also the rule that's hardened to follow. At first, I thought it meant don't get distracted by your reflection in windows or mirrors. Stay focused on your work. But that's not it. It means exactly what it says. Sometimes you'll see yourself walking the halls, doing rounds, checking charts, going about your shift. But it's not a reflection. It's not a hallucination. It's you. Another you, existing in the same space at the same time. The first time I saw her was 4 years ago. I was walking toward the supply closet at the far end of the east wing. I turned a corner, and there I was, walking toward myself from the opposite direction. Same scrubs. Same tired posture, same ID badge hanging crooked from my pocket. For a split second, we were going to walk past each other. Then I remembered the rule. I dropped my gaze to the floor and kept walking. I could hear her footsteps coming closer, passing, continuing on. I didn't look back. I didn't look up until I'd reached the supply closet, and she, whatever that was long gone. But I felt her looking at me as we passed. Felt her eyes on the side of my face. And I knew with absolute certainty that if I'd made eye contact, something would have shifted. Something would have been exchanged. It's happened 6 more times since then. Always during night shift. Always in quiet corridors where no one else is around. Always moving with purpose, like she has somewhere to be. Somewhere I'm supposed to be? I asked one of the older nurses about it once. She'd worked nights for 23 years before finally moving 2 days. You saw yourself? She said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Did you look at her? No. She nodded, relieved. Good, a nurse did that once. Looked right at her double. Stood there staring, trying to figure out what she was seeing. They locked eyes for maybe 5 seconds. What happened? She finished her shift. Clocked out. Drove home. Went to sleep. When she woke up, she couldn't remember how to get to the hospital. Couldn't remember the names of any of her patients. Couldn't remember the codes, the procedures, anything medical. It was like that part of her had been scooped out. No, she had to retrain completely. Start over like a new graduate. But she was never as good. Something was missing. Like she'd given away her muscle memory, her intuition. All the things you can't learn from a textbook. Rule 4. If you see yourself walking the halls, do not make eye contact. This is the rule I understand least. It's also the rule that's hardened to follow. At first, I thought it meant don't get distracted by your reflection in windows or mirrors. Stay focused on your work. But that's not it. It means exactly what it says. Sometimes you'll see yourself walking the halls, doing rounds, checking charts, going about your shift. But it's not a reflection. It's not a hallucination. It's you. Another you, existing in the same space at the same time. The first time I saw her was 4 years ago. I was walking toward the supply closet at the far end of the east wing. I turned a corner, and there I was, walking toward myself from the opposite direction. Same scrubs. Same tired posture, same ID badge hanging crooked from my pocket. For a split second, we were going to walk past each other. Then I remembered the rule. I dropped my gaze to the floor and kept walking. I could hear her footsteps coming closer, passing, continuing on. I didn't look back. I didn't look up until I'd reached the supply closet, and she, whatever that was long gone. But I felt her looking at me as we passed. Felt her eyes on the side of my face. And I knew with absolute certainty that if I'd made eye contact, something would have shifted. Something would have been exchanged. It's happened 6 more times since then. Always during night shift. Always in quiet corridors where no one else is around. Always moving with purpose, like she has somewhere to be. Somewhere I'm supposed to be? I asked one of the older nurses about it once. She'd worked nights for 23 years before finally moving 2 days. You saw yourself? She said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Did you look at her? No. She nodded, relieved. Good, a nurse did that once. Looked right at her double. Stood there staring, trying to figure out what she was seeing. They locked eyes for maybe 5 seconds. What happened? She finished her shift. Clocked out. Drove home. Went to sleep. When she woke up, she couldn't remember how to get to the hospital. Couldn't remember the names of any of her patients. Couldn't remember the codes, the procedures, anything medical. It was like that part of her had been scooped out. No, she had to retrain completely. Start over like a new graduate. But she was never as good. Something was missing. Like she'd given away her muscle memory, her intuition. All the things you can't learn from a textbook. I think about that a lot. What gets exchanged when you make eye contact with yourself? What the other version takes? What it gives in return? Because I don't think it's random. I think those doubles are collecting something. Experience, maybe skill, memory, all the things that make you good at this job. All the things you've learned through years of night. Shifts and difficult patience and split-second decisions, and I think they're building something with what they collect. Becoming more complete, more real, until eventually they won't be doubles anymore. They'll be replacements. Last month, I saw her again. We were both walking toward the nurse's station from different hallways. We would have arrived at the same spot at the same moment. I stopped walking, waited, let her reach the station first. Watched from a distance as she high-picked up a chart, flipped through it, made a note. Then walked away down a different hall. When I reached the nurse's station and looked at the chart she'd been holding, the note was in my handwriting, my exact handwriting. A medication adjustment for a patient I'd been treating all week. The correct adjustment. The one I'd been planning to make. She'd done my job, and she'd done it right. That's when I understood. The doubles aren't trying to hurt us. They're trying to become us. And every time we see them and don't look, we give them a little more space to exist. A little more permission to be real. But if we acknowledge them fully, they don't just take our skills. They take our place. And we become the ones walking empty halls at 3 a.m., not quite real, trying to catch someone's eye. These 4 rules have kept me alive and sane for 11 years. But lately, I've started noticing something. The gaps between incidents are getting shorter. The things I see are getting bolder. More frequent, more solid. Last night, I watched the camera feed and saw someone in a patient's room. The faceless figure I've seen before. But this time, when it turned toward the camera, it didn't just look. It moved closer. Pressed its blank face right up to the lens. Like it was trying to see me as clearly as I was seeing it. The feed went black for 7 seconds. When it came back, the figure was gone. But on the patient's monitor, her heart rate had spiked to 140. She was still asleep, but her EKG showed the pattern of someone terrified. This morning I found another drawing. Not in a patient's room. In the break room. On the table where we leave our things. A child's drawing, but I don't know which child. It showed all four of us on night shift, the 3 nurses and the resident on call. We were standing in a circle. In the center of the circle was a door, and the door was open. I burned it in the parking lot at 5:51 a.m., but I kept thinking about that open door. Where it led, what would come through. Today, before I came in for my shift, I looked up the hospital's history. Specifically, what was here before they built it in 1972. The records were sparse, but I found enough. Children's Cemetery, active from 1891 to 1967, mostly kids who died in a tuberculosis outbreak in the early 1900s, but also kids from the influenza epidemic in 1918, and kids from a fire at an orphanage in 1943, over 2,000. Children buried in that plot of land when they built the hospital. They relocated the graves to a cemetery 20 miles away, officially, properly, with records and permits. But relocating bodies is expensive, and corners get cut. And sometimes relocation means covering things up and building over them and hoping no one asks too many questions. I think about those playroom children, their voices, their handprints, their desperation to be seen. To be let out, I think about the faceless figure that visits sleeping patients, how it touches their hair, how it stands beside them like it's waiting for something. I think about my double, walking these halls, doing my job, getting better at being me, and I think about the rule they haven't given me yet. The 5th rule, the one I'm going to need soon, because whatever boundary has been keeping those things. Contain keeping them mostly in the shadows, mostly at a distance that boundary is failing. And when it finally breaks, 4 rules won't be enough. But tonight, I clock in. I make my rounds. I follow the rules exactly. I do not enter rooms where children sleep. I burn drawings that show me things I don't want to become. I stay away from the locked playroom. And when I see myself walking toward me in an empty corridor, I look at my feet and keep moving, because the alternative is worse. The alternative is giving up, going home, quitting, leaving the night shift understaffed, leaving children unprotected. Someone has to be here. Someone has to follow the rules. Someone has to stand between those kids and whatever is trying to reach them in the dark. For 11 years, someone has been me. I don't know how much longer I can hold the line, but I'll try, because that's what you do in this job. You show up. You follow the rules, and you hope that's enough to keep everyone safe until morning, even when you're not sure what morning looks like anymore. Even when you're starting to forget which version of yourself clocked in for the shift. Even when the playroom door rattles. At 3 a.m. and you hear your own voice on the other side asking to be let out.